Welcome to Organic Christian Life. This is episode 001. Where do we start? How about we start at the beginning? Wait, not that beginning. Let's try 1960s, okay? All right. I was born in 1963. Now, I was raised as a Roman Catholic, so I learned about God academically. But everything was transactional. Nothing was relational. I learned about Moses and the Ten Commandments, and if you do good, then God will bless you. If you do bad, then God will be mad at you. And that is about all I knew. Then, at the age of 17, I had a really amazing spiritual experience. Now, many people refer to this experience as being born from above, a spiritual birth, being reborn, or being born again. Whatever term that people use for it, I can tell you that it's a very, very real experience. And so we have a natural birth and a spiritual birth. Now, Jesus talked about this in John chapter 3. He was talking to a man named Nicodemus, and he told Nicodemus, he said, "Don't be surprised if I say to you that you must be born again." And Nicodemus said, how can that happen? Can you go back into your mother's womb and be born again? And Jesus said, that which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of spirit is spirit. In other words, there's a natural birth and a spiritual birth. Both are real. And so that is where we start. We start with understanding that there's a natural birth and a spiritual birth. Both are real, but what is a spiritual birth? Well, what I can tell you is a spiritual birth is not weird or wacky or cult-like. In fact, very much like a natural birth, a spiritual birth is organic and natural. In fact, it is supernatural, if you will. But a spiritual birth is not learned or earned. But again, it's natural and very, very beautiful. In fact, you don't need to join a church or a specific group to experience a spiritual birth. And once you experience this spiritual birth, you don't necessarily need to join a group or a church because it is personal and relational. Now, because it is relational, you may want to join others who have a like-minded faith, but that is for another conversation. Now, you may have heard of something called the sinner's prayer, and that is one way that you can experience a spiritual birth very easily. And it goes something like this. God, I believe you exist. I believe you created all things. I believe you created me. I believe you love me. I believe you gave Jesus to this earth to show us the path to you, to open up the door, if you will, to forgive us all our sins, and to grant us newness of life, or spiritual birth. So I'm asking you, from the bottom of my heart, to come into my life, cleanse me from all sin, past, present, and future, and to grant me oneness with you. Now, if you mean that from the bottom of your heart, and that's the key, you have to have an open heart, then you will experience newness of life and a spiritual birth. Now, once you do that, there's more. Like the salesman says, wait, there's more. You may want to read the Bible and understand these things better. I would recommend starting at the Gospel of John and then going forward from there. Now, in another episode, we'll talk about how to read the Bible and how to understand it. But that's for another conversation. Now, what is beautiful here is that just like a natural birth, a spiritual birth is a lifelong journey. Now, let's talk about some aspects of this journey. Now, most evangelicals view the new birth as a ticket to heaven. You might have heard the term being saved. In other words, being saved from hell and getting an entrance into heaven. But I offer for your consideration the possibility that the real purpose of the new birth is not so much to get into heaven, but to get heaven into you. So then, if heaven is inside you, you are already living in eternity right now, right here, while on earth. Think about that. That means when your physical body dies, you simply walk from earth into heaven, like walking from one room into another. Let's drill down on this a little deeper. So, in other words, we move from one dimension to another dimension, from the physical 3D world to a spiritual 4D world. Now, some may call it a shift from mechanical physics to quantum physics, or entering the quantum field. I like to use the terms natural realm and spiritual realm. Either way, we are merely limited by our physical bodies. We grow and develop in both areas. The goal is not so much to become perfect, but to mature. Mature naturally as a person and mature spiritually. That is the goal. Think about it. When we are born, we are not expected to stay a baby or even a child. We are expected to grow up. Likewise, with a spiritual birth, we are not expected to stay a spiritual baby all our life, or even a spiritual child. No, in fact, we are expected to grow up. However, it is a journey of discovery and learning. So then, how do we learn? Well, primarily, there are two methods involved: academic and experience. Much of what we learn in life is through experience. For example, riding a bicycle, driving a car, learning a musical instrument. All these things involve not only academic, but learning by experience. God is a real person. And yes, we can learn about God academically, for example, going to a theological seminary. But mostly we learn about God relationally or by experience. I don't know if you've ever heard of something called practicing the presence of God. Well, just like practicing piano or practicing riding a bike or practicing anything, we can practice the presence of God and thereby learn much about God relationally. Let's take this another step further. When we are little, we learn through the 5 senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing. Well, when you think about it, we actually have 5 spiritual senses that correspond to 5 natural senses. We can learn spiritual aspects, we can learn about God through these 5 spiritual senses. In other words, we can hear the voice of God. We can see, in a sense, what God is doing, or see in the Spirit. We can smell, taste, and feel, or sense spiritual things. We need to realize that this is something we grow into. We learn, we grow, we process. We learn, we grow, we process. Thereby, we become spiritually mature. But it all starts with the spiritual birth, which brings us to the last point of this session. So here's a question for you. When we are born into this world, can we ever be unborn? Think this through for a minute. I do not mean cease to live, but actually be unborn. Is that possible? Now apply that answer that you came up with to a spiritual birth. Can you be unborn again? Take some time to really contemplate that. Keep in mind as you do this that the physical is temporary, but the spirit is eternal. Which one, therefore, is superior in nature and effect? For those who have been taught certain doctrinal or religious views, this may require letting go of preconceived ideas. Think about this simply and practically. For example, when we are born, we inherited our parents' biological DNA. Therefore, no matter what happens in life, we will always have that DNA. In other words, we will always be connected to them. Nothing can ever change that. Likewise, when we experience a spiritual birth, we inherit spiritual DNA. Therefore, no matter what happens on earth, we will always be connected to God. Always. Let me phrase it another way. There is nothing that you can do that can ever undo what He did at the cross. That bears repeating. There is nothing that you can do or ever will do that can ever undo what He did at the cross. I realize this may be a new concept for some people, and that is okay, because we are all growing in our understanding. There have been many times over 40 years that I needed to unlearn and relearn some things. That simply means real growth is happening. Remember, it is about growing into something and becoming the person God designed you to be. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on Facebook, Organic Christian Life. We also have a YouTube channel, so be sure to check them out and have a very blessed day.